I missed James at the gathering, but it's like been the most talked about session, or one of the most talked about sessions from the whole event in 2024. This is a powerhouse episode. It's going to help us to get our minds in the game. How do you set goals that you can achieve, that you will be surprised when you achieve them? How do you create habits for high performance in your life? And how do you win consistently?
James Lawrence is an incredible human being, and if you don't know his story, you need to know his story. Originally, he's athlete, keynote speaker, author, ran 50 triathlons in 50 states in 50 days, and then went to beat his own records and do 100 in 100 days. And then just for fun, after he did 100 days, he did 101. So he's got a lot to share about pushing limits, pushing boundaries, achieving big things, and he's got a lot of heart and a lot of really amazing stories to share with us. So let's dive into it.
Let's get into it.
James Lawrence, we are so happy to have you here today. How are you, my friend?
I'm freaking amazing, because that's the only way to be.
That's so good. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while. It's been a few months since the gathering, but we've had the opportunity to chat with so many people that were in the room, hear the feedback. You really moved everyone. And I personally, it was so great for me because I found you. And I hang my hat on that. I was like, this is one of Mandy's picks. I had the opportunity to hear you speak a few years back. And when we picked our theme for 2024, which was trusting the process, you were the first person that I put on the vision board because of all the human beings I've ever met. You truly embody that. And what you shared on stage was incredible. Just who you are is incredible. So we're excited to have a conversation with you today.
Thank you, Mandy, and I'm thrilled to be here. And yet you couldn't be wrong about that theme of the event, the process, and you can't win at life if you don't follow that very motto. And so I think it's one of the key foundations to success.
Mm-hmm. So let's start. You have a quote that you use. It's a Mike Tyson quote, and it is, "Everyone has a game plan until you get punched in the face." Can you take us back to 2008 and how that really showed up for you in your professional life?
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in Calgary, where you're based out of, and just had an amazing upbringing, but always had bigger dreams and aspirations. And made my way to the United States, found a girl, just celebrated 24 years of marriage. We've got 5 kids. It's been an incredible journey. And I was chasing that American dream, and I've been an entrepreneur my entire life. Like, it's in my core. I actually think now I'm at a point where I'm unemployable, and I just love it. I love the grind so much, and sometimes when I'm out of the grind, I miss it, and I want to figure out how to get back into it. But yeah, in 2008, we'd started my little family, and we built a mortgage company up, and I was living that dream. And then the '08 economic crash happened, and it was centered around the mortgage industry.
Mm-hmm.
And so we fought and tried to trust the process. And, even despite that, there's so many things that are outside of our control. And we ended up losing everything and just financially hit rock bottom, emotionally, just like really strained everything, every component of life. When man, as providers, men or women, you would remember, and I remember distinctly the moment they knocked on my door and took away my home. I had 408, I would have had my fourth daughter on the way. And just like, what do we do now?
So what was that conversation at the table? How did you decide as a family on what those next steps were going to be for you? And how did Iron Man choose you, or did you choose Iron Man?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's, I think rock bottom is the greatest gift that was ever given to us. And I think people learn the most about who they are when they're stripped of everything.
Right.
I've heard both sides of the conversations with the fires that are going on in LA right now. I hear a lot of people, it's tragic and it's sad and everything, but I hear a lot of people that are saying, like, man, there's opportunity here. And even in the face of catastrophic moments and despair, in personal lives and in business, there's always an opportunity to regroup. And you met my wife, Sunny. She's incredible and has been an amazing support system. And Definitely, I married up, and we can all agree on that across the board. And we just sat down, and it was not a hard conversation. And she was just like, "Okay, we're doing this together, and what does it look like?" And moments of rock bottom, they'll do two things. They'll either drive a wedge between couples and friends and families and business partners, and you go separate ways, or it brings you together and you become more powerful. And for us, that's exactly what happened. We just like linked arms and said, let's go. And what does this look like? And it was actually in '08. Sonny and I had found the triathlon community and we fell in love with it. And we were doing races and local stuff and just having a lot of fun. Well, '08 was my very first ever attempt at the Ironman. And so it was just kind of really unique timing in terms of what it was. And I'll say Ironman chose me. And then we just went down that road, and the last 15 years have been crazy, chaotic, and historic. And I'm just so grateful to have hit rock bottom. It was the greatest gift. I'm so grateful for Sunny and her willingness to link arms and say, let's do this together. And we just trusted the process and had a vision and reverse engineered it and said, what's the one thing we can do today that's in our control to move the needle? And we just focused literally one day at a time. And we are that success story that took 15 years overnight.
So incredible. I don't think most people would choose the path that you chose. Like, it says a lot about your character, what you said yes to. Like, so much courage, so much bravery. It feels like there'd be easier paths if you're doing a career change to, not put yourself into the physical exertion of the path less traveled.
Well, I think here's what's interesting too is we don't like in '08 and when we first started, it wasn't 100 consecutive Ironmans. It wasn't that journey. It wasn't that level of suffering. It was, again, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm coaching athletes. What can I do to separate myself from the competition, and how can I stand out from the crowd? And we started with half Ironman world record, which at the time it was as big as we could think. It was where we were on our journey, and the suffering kind of escalated over time as we changed, as our team changed, as our belief system changed, as we evolved into more and more becomes possible. And so, it didn't start with, okay, what level can I suffer at in order to be successful? It was an entrepreneurial effort. It was raising money for charity. It was doing all these things in order to just show up in our lives and our journey. And really, you meet yourself where you're at, and that changes and evolves over time. And in 2008 through 10 and the start of those world records, that's where we were at. And it's always interesting looking back on a journey. Because when you're in the middle of something that seems impossible, it's the hardest thing you can think of if you're pushing, right? And looking back on it now, that was as big as and as epic as we could think. And now looking back on it, it's almost laughable compared to where we are now. And I kind of think that's the point in life. Like you need to look back 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years and see that evolution and growth. And I did a post just this morning and I said, man, we need to pause and think for a moment. And the 10-year-old version or the 10-year ago version of us would be in awe of where we're at today. And they would be, so proud of the journey that we've been on. And so I think sometimes we have to pause because in the present moment, and you're wired this way, the bar, it keeps moving, it keeps elevating, it keeps raising because we're on that trajectory. And I think we're always just like, oh, I'm gonna make it, I'm gonna get there, I'm gonna get there. But we're moving the target all the time. And I think sometimes it's very important to pause and just go, holy cow, I've cleared the bar hundreds of times.
I like what you said about you don't look up back on hitting rock bottom with any kind of negativity. I'm sure it's like not always fun to go back and relive those memories specifically, but there is this beautiful thing about those like massive trials in life where a lot of things get stripped away painfully. Oftentimes it's painfully, but the thing that you're left with or the sort of it forces you to have a conversation with yourself about like, what's the actual thing that matters to me? What are the actual things that I care about that I won't lose, that I can't sacrifice, or that I will sacrifice to keep? I'm curious to you, like, what were some of the things when you hit that moment? What was it that you were like holding on to? What were the sort of the truths that you and your wife were like, hey, this is enduring for us. This is not something we're going to sacrifice. This is a value that we're going to maintain.
Yeah, and with anything, perspective is always in the moment and hopefully ever changing as we mature and gain some emotional intelligence. But kind of in that moment, we were holding on to the breath in our lungs and the beat of the heart in our chest, and five beautiful. I'm sorry, Quinn hadn't come along yet, so four beautiful little baby girls. Um, some food in the fridge, some refuge and friends that opened their doors to allow us to stay there. And during that portion when we were living in our home, or found a place to rent, the landlord kept raising the rents, and we'd signed a contract, so he was trying to figure out ways to get us out and was turning off the heat and doing all these things that were illegal. And it got to the point where we would put all of our kids in front of the fireplace, and I would wake up every 2 hours and put wood on the fire to keep these kids warm. And it's these small moments of appreciation. My friend brought his dad worked at the coal mines, and he brought over just this box of coal, and
Mhm.
those would burn all night long to where I could sleep and not have to get up and put fire on there so that we could stay warm in the front living room. And it was just, in life, we get to choose where we put our focus and attention. And I could have been like super bitter and angry and all these things, but I was so grateful that I had a friend that was aware enough and cared enough to bring over that box of coal so that I could get some sleep, so that I could go find work to provide for the family and get ourselves out of the situation. And so I think Sunny and I just really chose to hold on to the things that we had, not the things that we wanted. And I think we fall into that trap in today's world, is like we live in a world of, social media and watching people's best moments and the things that they have, and we live in the world of want and I'll be happy when. And I think her and I had the ability in that moment to be just very hyper present and focus on what we had, not what we lacked. And that was the catalyst that allowed us to continue on, to be present and trust the process and focus just on today, and was really the process of us digging ourselves out of that hole.
Mhm. That's so your brand, like one step in front of the next, just one step at a time. I think looking backwards, all this reflection and being able to look at this so positively is so powerful. You've been through so much. I'm curious if you could really take us to the pavement when that voice in your head, when you're actually in the moment and facing, really pushing yourself into these limits, like what that voice probably wasn't always positive. What did that sound like for you?
Oh, dude, that voice in all of our heads in the peak moments is violent, it's loud, it's chaotic, it's confusing. And it just I've learned over a long period of time that um, winning in life means managing the conversations in our head.
Hmm.
And we, it's hard, it's not easy, but over time, it's a skill set you can develop to control the processes and the thoughts. One of the things I recognized was you can't have two thoughts at the same time.
Mm.
And and darkness can't exist in the presence of light. In fact, they've proven that darkness doesn't exist, it's the absence of light. And so for me, we'll call negativity darkness and positivity light. And so when I find myself in that conversation, I pause, right? I pause and I'm like, okay, I grab a pen and paper and I write down everything that is worrisome, that is like chaotic, that is going through my mind. Take a deep breath, and then I go back to my list and I'll cross out everything that I can't control. And then I'm left with one, two things that I can focus on and control. And then I start to bring in the positive things in the moment, and then it shuts out the negative. And so it's not about eliminating the voice or the negativity. It's about controlling the dialogue and injecting in where you can in order to flip the conversation. And the more we sit and focus and stew on those negatives, the worse it gets. It's called catastrophizing. I talk about it a little bit from stage. And what we do as adults is we look far, far into the future. We create these scenarios and conversations that haven't happened. And 90% of the stuff we worry about never happens. And so it's like, once we recognize that and can reverse engineer it, it's about not allowing us to stew in those moments and in things that are fictional in our heads. And because what we do is we sit there and we stew in it, and then we start to spiral, and then anxiety starts to sit in, and depression, and then we like isolate ourselves and we sit in darkness and we start sleeping. All these things start happening, and bam, now we're in a cycle of destruction.
Mm-hmm.
So it's as simple as arming yourself with some tools, recognizing when it's happened, pausing, doing a few exercises to eliminate it, bring in the light, and then the cure, like obviously there's clinical stuff that we're not talking about, but the cure to situational life depression and sadness, those words used a lot, and hopefully everyone understands the context I'm saying it in, is keeping yourself busy and distracting yourself, movement, motion. Uh, Motion creates emotion, right? And so if we're busy doing things and progressing in life and trying to solve problems, guess what? We're no longer depressed because what we focus on magnifies. And so as soon as we shift where we're putting our focus and attention, that becomes magnified and becomes the central point of what we're doing. And so I always try to bring in light, positivity, focus on that. I'm big on affirmations and manifesting and woo woo, whatever.
I love that. It's like taking your power back, right? Pausing, noticing, what am I paying attention to? Is this voice really serving me right now? Am I in control of this? Am I not in control of this? It's really powerful. You work with a lot of people now and, helping them go after their goals. And those goals are probably not running 50 triathlons in 50 days or 101 triathlons in 101 days. But, for those of us, I think doubt can be the killer of even that first step. How do you approach someone that is, really stuck in that loop of I'm not good enough, or this person is so much further ahead than I am, or what will people think of me? Like, how do you approach that? And how is that really getting in the way of people taking that first step?
Yeah, comparison is so destructive, and we just have to recognize that we're all in different parts of journeys at different times, and every expert that you see had a humble beginning. They started somewhere. And you just have to start amassing wins. And the reason that you're feeling down on yourself and frustrated and that imposter syndrome is because maybe you've had some failures in your life, or someone has told you you're a failure, and then you have this new belief system. And so you have to slowly transition into and develop a new belief system. Success breeds success, confidence breeds confidence. And so you have to start checking off some wins. And in order to do that, you can't have this monster big goal that you will fail at if you try it right now. You have to stair step your way to these big moments. And in order to do that, you have to set little small incremental goals along the way and start checking off wins. Like you can just trick your mind and be like, okay, today's win is making my bed. Great, you made your bed, you've got a win. Today's win is choosing the right thing at breakfast. Great, you've now got 2 wins under your belt, right? And then you start to do it. And all of a sudden you shift and move the way you look at yourself, and now you're starting to gain momentum. But it has to start with these really small, borderline pathetic wins. But it also, it really depends where you're starting, but you have to start to change the way you associate yourself. And yet, we're not going to be perfect. It's totally okay. You have to look at your day, your year, your month, your year as an average. And you're going to have perfection. And it's about having those quick, fast turnarounds and getting back at the task. I love the quote. Joe Rogan said it. I think he's like, just pretend like your life is a documentary and that you're being filmed at all time. What would that person do? How would you show up if you knew lights, camera, action were always on you, right? Just show up and act like that person, and eventually you become that person. It's the old adage of fake it till you make it. Well, just act it until you become it. And that, I think, like that's a more positive spin on it, because you're not faking it. You're just acting it until you really embody who that is. And so your original question, you have to start stacking small wins, figure out where you want to go, shelf it, reverse engineer it, and then start with the steps today to gain that momentum and that success.
Totally. That makes a ton of sense. That and resonates a lot with me. I think we can set goals and then we take action towards those goals. But as we take action, we kind of have two postures, it seems to me. One is a posture that expects a victory and expects success. and one is a posture that expects a challenge, a setback, a failure, or whatever. So you can have a goal and then literally take action that expects you to fail at that goal. And it's so it can be such a destructive loop to find yourself in. But if you can think about like even I love what you're saying about stacking small wins. It's like, well, if I just get up earlier, that's going to be 1/2 hour or 1 hour closer to the goal that I've set, and that's a small victory. And winning does beget winning. I think there was a study that was done on like with rats or mice or something, and they gave an advantage to a group of rats and then had them sort of compete with the disadvantaged rats. It's kind of a weird experiment, but eventually they took away the advantage. The rats that were winning kept winning without any advantage just because they were accustomed to winning. And I think that the more you focus on the wins, the more you focus with gratitude and with like Thanksgiving, even some of those long wins you have, like a 24-year marriage and 5 kids. It's like the more you focus on those things, the more it resets your actual cognition to expect another victory, and then you start to walk towards your goals in a completely different posture, it seems like.
Yeah, I think one of the greatest gifts people can do is to let go of control. Because we never had control. There's so many things that are outside of our control. And so I think I love the saying that if you take care of today, it'll take care of tomorrow. And we're so busy trying to control tomorrow, the next day, the next day, the next day, and then we're losing focus again on what's happening right now. And if you do, the secret of success is doing a lot of little things consistently over a long period of time. And so if you can figure out what those little things are, start winning every single day. I mean, Andy Frisella, he says, win today, win the week, win the moment, win the hour, win the day, win the week, win the month, win the year. You win at life, right? And it's about just those small incremental things, but it always comes down to where does it start? Win the moment. And life is just a series of moments stacked on top of each other.
Let's go with the consistency there for a second, because as we're recording this, it's the beginning of January. This is a relevant conversation all the time, but especially hot right now. I think Monday was official like National Quitters Day. And it's when
when you give up on your...
It's when most people actually just quit
8 days into the year.
Give up on their resolutions and what they set out to do because it's hard. They're met with their first challenge. They said they were going to stick to a routine, and then something happened and they're like, it's fine. I won't do it anymore. It doesn't matter anymore. And I think a lot of people forget about, the level of discipline and commitment that is actually required to follow through with the goals. This is you. If you open this up in the dictionary, your face is there. So please talk through this with us and, some support on how we can actually follow through and achieve the big things in our life.
Yeah. Do you remember how excited you were when you started day one on a job? Do you remember how excited you were like the beginning of a relationship?
For sure.
Do you remember how excited you were like first day of school? Right? All these things. And so the way that I play tricks on my mind is every day is day one. Could you, we've made it 24 years in our marriage because I treat her like it's day number one. And I treat my this podcast is the first podcast I've ever done. It's the first time I'm sharing my story, right? I speak on stages from around the world. I've literally shared my story. I just figured it out over 1,000 times.
Wow.
But it's the audience's first time. And so when I'm on stage, I have to pretend like it's the first time I'm showing up with that same energy, that same resolve, and that same conviction. And like I said, we're not going to be perfect. We're going to make mistakes. But tomorrow, dude, it's day one. It's day one again, right? And if you could do it on January 1st, just treat every day like it's January 1st with that same excitement, because you've done it once. You've proven it. And that's why we're so successful in these multi-day challenges, the 50 and the 100. One, it's very laid out what I'm going to do. James Clear says we don't fall to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems. And during the 100, during the 50, during the climb up Kilimanjaro, during the bike across the country, during the run across Greece, I knew exactly what I was doing every single day. And I will tell you exactly how successful you're going to be if I look at your calendar. How scheduled are your activities? If you pull up my calendar right now, it is workout, podcast, lunch, pick up sun, like minute to minute every single day, I have it filled with something that is purposeful and meaningful to me. And so every day is day one. And then I'm going to flip that all the way on its head and say, every day is the last day.
Oof.
Now, if you're showing up with the intensity that it's the excitement that it's your first day, and then the emotion recognizing that this could be the last time I do it. So what type of energy do you show up on both sides of that spectrum, right? And really, if we can framework that every single day, recognize, okay, we're not going to be perfect, but I'm being filmed again. We're doing the documentary, and it's day number one. Like, so and then really lay out like every single night. What you should do is like sit down in 5 minutes. Like, what's my three priorities for tomorrow? Boom, boom, boom. How am I going to work and process the tomorrow? Like, where's my focus and attention? Boom, boom, boom. And then wake up and you're not going, what am I gonna? I've got this big dream and I've got 40 things to do. And what am I going to do? And then next thing you know, 2 hours have gone by and you're like, well, I didn't get anything done. Right. And so it's like, okay, if you wake the 100, I woke up, I knew I had to eat. I knew I had to do a stretch routine. I knew I had to get my ass to the pool. I knew I had to put my wetsuit on. I knew I had to get in the pool. I knew I had to swim 2.4 miles. I knew I had to go right to the bathroom. I knew I had to change. I knew I had to refuel my body. I knew where my bike was. That was all set up like second to second. That's how you accomplish things that nobody else in the world has done. That you want to become one of 8 billion people in the world, and I'm getting fired up, but you want to become one of 8 billion people in the world, you have to know exactly what you're doing and how you're executing minute to minute. You've got to show up like it's day one. You got to show up like it's your last day. You show up with that kind of energy, dude, stop it.
I'm fired up right now.
You cannot lose. It's impossible to lose if you follow that structure. Impossible.
I think that the other piece of your recipe, though, is like a certain audacity that you have. Like your goals are audacious. You're not you're not setting reasonable goals.
I have a reasonable process.
Yeah, absolutely. I love your reasonable process, but I think sometimes where people get stuck is in like lowering their expectations on their self or lowering their expectations on their potential. Like how do you? You're such an inspiring person. Like, what would you say to someone to try to make them set a harder goal, set a bigger goal,
Challenge
set a bigger
themselves.
vision to like go and embrace the challenge moving forward?
Well, and there's the hard part because everybody's heart is different.
Mhm.
And two, you can only dream as big as we align our beliefs to the level of our experiences and our perspective to the experiences that we've had. And so until you show up in your life and start having moments and experiences instead of sitting at home waiting for friggin' your passion to knock on your friggin' door, which is going to happen, you have to go have experiences. And so until you go out there and have experiences, you can't have that, vision or process to be able to elevate yourself. The biggest regret y'all are going to have in life is getting to the finish line and meeting your potential. And someone said to me one time, they were like, "Hey, the goal in life is to become the best version of yourself and chase them down." And then I really thought about that, and I'm like, I'm never gonna catch him. And that's the gift because that version of me is always evolving because I'm adapting, changing as I'm progressing through my journey. And as long as I'm in pursuit of the extroverts, and I want to get to the finish line and be like, you son of a bitch, I almost got you. I almost got you, but I didn't. And then I want to hug them and say, thank you for pushing me. And we're here together. And I did everything I could. And I don't want to have any of that regret or any of that whatnot. I just want to like people like what drives you. It's interesting because I'm in the endurance space and people, a lot of times that people that get into running and it's such a gift for people, but they're doing an addiction transfer. And it's the best kind of addiction transfer because it's either alcohol or abuse or drug addiction or whatever it is. And then they shift it over to running or cycling or endurance or whatnot. And so when I first started this journey, everyone's like, dude, are you okay? Like, what are you running from? And I'm like, I don't understand your question. And I'm like, I had a great upbringing. I'm like, I've never done drugs and all these things. And it took me a while to be like, no, I'm just chasing potential.
Running towards.
I'm running towards something, and I think a lot of people are, and not everybody that's like trying to succeed in life is running from like this traumatic past, and we all have our issues and whatnot, and everybody should go to therapy and get that worked on, whatever that looks like for you, or find a higher power and lean on that. But for me, I'm just seriously running towards potential, and I'm chasing down this avatar that's ever moving, and the pursuit of that SOB is so fun for me because he's a freaking badass. And I'm never gonna get him, but it's just like, oh, I'm close every time, and then he sneaks away.
I'd love to talk about your support system because it's an independent sport, but you have not done any of this alone. Like your daughter is the CEO of your company. Your wife is your biggest cheerwoman. She's amazing. Sunny is amazing. Tell us a little bit about the community at your table that's helped you be successful.
Yeah, it was interesting. One of the big questions I get at corporate events and retreats and coaching that we do is like, how do you assemble your team? And initially when we first started on this journey, we'd broken two world records. We bootstrapped those and figured out how to do it. And then I was like, oh, for sure, people are going to get on board with this 50. We're established, we've got credibility. And they were like, dude, we can't afford to associate ourselves with a failure. Like that's impossible, can't be done. And I'm like, dude, I haven't failed yet. And they're like, yeah, but you're going to, and we can't put our name on this thing. And so I was like, okay, I got to assemble my team. And at the time, my team was my five children, ages 5 to 11, my wife, and I had two buddies that were like, dude, we'll go on an adventure this summer. We ain't doing nothing. And and then we were so exhausted, and those boys and Sonny were kind of considered the four horsemen. They just rose up and did what it took. No excuses, understood the task, and just became master problem solvers. And to me, that's how you find your team. You hopefully recruit dogs, and then you find out when you exhaust them and ask them to do impossible tasks. And then as a leader, you lead from the front, you make no excuses, you set the standard, and your team will rise to that standard. And then all of a sudden you look around and you're like, dude, my team is legit. And you show up and you believe anything's impossible, and I'll ride or die for those guys, and they'll do the same for me. If I'm in trouble, I call them. Sonny and I are obviously linked at the hip and side by side and step by step in everything we do. And so yeah, nothing great's ever accomplished on our own. I could not have done this without my team. I couldn't have done it without my faith. I couldn't have done it without myself and the sacrifice and hard ass work that I did. But at the end of the day, I'm not the Iron Cowboy. We're the Iron Cowboy. In fact, I said this on Andy Purcell's podcast last year, and I said it kind of blew up on me in a good way. I said the goal of life is not to get to the mountaintop. It's how many people can you bring to the mountaintop with you. And that's why, everybody says, hey, what's next? And I'm like, I'm satisfied. I don't want to die doing what I do. And what's next for me is helping people really start winning those conversations in their head and navigating their heart and whatever that looks like, and helping them figure out how to really start to chase down that avatar of who they believe the best version of them is.
So powerful. The influences at our table and the people we surround ourselves are so key. And I know when you were getting started, you had a lot of doctors that were saying, no, this is not a good idea. You shouldn't do this. But can you imagine if you listened?
Oh, dude, I one of the greatest gifts and counsel I got early on, a mentor said to me, he's like, hey, don't listen to anybody and what they say. Believe in what you're doing because that's the only thing that matters. And again, your your perspective is based off of the experiences that you've had. And nobody had had the experiences that we had because we were breaking barriers every single time. And so how could I possibly expect you to understand when it's a mind-blowing moment for you looking into what we're doing, but for us, it was the next natural progression on our journey. And I think people need to show up in a capacity in their lives every single day that you get to a point where an Ironman a day becomes routine. And I'll share this quick story. So when I first started this journey, the world record was 20 in a year, all official events held by a gentleman in Belgium. And I was like, okay, I can do 30. And we did that. We broke the world record, and we started to shift the way people thought. And then we did 50, and people said that was impossible and couldn't be done. And then we kept raising the bar. And then I just kept showing up and believing in myself, and my team believed in us. And we just really started to charge forward and continued to move the bar and raise the ceiling. Well, I'm 80 days in, 80 consecutive in to this thing, a world first. And I am just broken emotionally, physically, mentally. And I still had 20 more to go. and I posted this post on social media that I was kind of having a rough time, and people were like, "Oh, dude, you can do it. You only have 20 more to go." And I'm like, "Dude, years ago you said I couldn't do 20. And now you're saying I only have 20 more to go." And so this is this I'm going to frame this for you and anybody listening is you have to show up in your life in a capacity where your belief system exceeds belief. You have to execute on it to the point where you've now not only changed who you are, but you've changed public perception as to what's possible. They went from 21 and 30 can't be done to you only have 20 more to go after doing 80 consecutive. And so imagine in your lives if you show up in a capacity that you didn't just change yourself, but you had that massive shift in anybody and thousands of people that were watching you, that they changed their vernacular and their belief system. Like how powerful of a notion is that?
Yeah, it makes you wonder. Like, I think in so many different domains, we have not yet scraped the surface of what's possible. Like, it reminds me of like nobody thought a 6 minute mile was possible, and then as soon it was broken. Was it a 4 minute mile? Is that what it
The
is?
4 minute mile, Roger Bannister.
Right, and then as soon as he did it, it was like 10 other people could do it. Like,
Yeah, it's interesting the way that that works because it's the first person to do it. It takes faith.
Hmm.
It takes belief and faith. But as soon as somebody else does it, then you're like, oh, well, it's possible, right? And so it's impossible until somebody does it. And then as soon as somebody does it, boom, high school kids are breaking 4 minute miles now, right? And so I don't like to break records. I like to set new standards for other people to chase. And I think if people change the way they showed up in life and was like, I'm going to stop comparing myself against the current standard of excellence, and I'm going to set that new bar. I'm going to set the new standard for people to chase. The world would be a very different place.
oh, I just think about like the audience that attends the gathering, the businesses that are represented there, and the business leaders that are represented there. Like how different the landscape of our society would be if each and every one of those leaders fully embrace that kind of mindset. But I'm not just gonna buck convention. I'm gonna reinvent the definition of what's possible for my category, for my business, for my customers, for this problem that I'm solving. It's such a it's actually a like an exciting thing to think about. More people embracing that kind of mindset in their work and
Well,
their
we
lives.
live in an amazing time, but somewhat of a tragic time in terms of this new upcoming generation. And I'm not bagging on a generation, and I'm contrasting them directly. The current standard of excellence in terms of the workforce, in terms of everything, is just showing up. How did we get to the point where that's the current standard of excellence? And I'm not picking on a generation. I am pulling facts from my kids, their employments, their friends, the employers, and everything that I'm seeing firsthand as it's happening. My daughter was the supervisor of the pool, and she said, "Oh, this kid didn't show up today," and I'm like, "Oh, poor kid, he lost his job." And she's like, "No, we have a no call, no show, three strike policy." That's the current standard. You can no call, no show 3 times before you get fired because there's so many people that just don't show up to their job. And I'm like, dude, I sound like that old person now, but I'm like, dude, when I was working back in the day, like I thought about not showing up and I got a phone call and they're like, "Hey, we know you're thinking about not coming today, you're fired." Like, how did we go from there to there to here, right? Like I'm just like, that's the current standard of excellence today, and it's pathetic. And if you can just show up and you're exceeding above others, I'm like, we're in a very troublesome situation.
What's the path out from your perspective? Like if you're a leader of an organization, maybe you are somebody who has an incredible amount of ambition and an exciting vision for the future, and at the same time you find yourself within an organization or within a culture, within a community of people that don't hold that same standard. What do you have to is the only way to do it to kind of like go forge your own path, be an individual, or what's the way you approach it with your team to bring that?
It's leadership. And I'll go back. I've said Andy Frisella's name a couple times in here, but his company is First Form, and it's now probably almost $1 billion company that he started from the trunk of his car. And if you go there, it is culture and it is expectations. And it is like you walk into that place and you're like, oh, this is different. The energy here is different. And so If he can pull it off there and other companies are doing it, then it is leadership from the top down. We are bowing to this generation, and that needs to stop immediately. There needs to be standards, there needs to be expectations, there needs to be a massive shift. And it's not about um compassion or empathy or all these things. It's about showing up and working hard and adapting, evolving. We are doing an absolute disservice to these younger kids by allowing them to, did you say anything to them and they turn into a pile of marshmallow on the ground? I'm like, how are we building resilience in individuals? Like, we're very sarcastic in our home. Like, I am not worried about my kids going into the real world because they can take it and they can also dish it, and they are resilient and they are tough. And man, I was early, when they're into teenagers, but now they're becoming young adults. I'm like, I ain't worried about my kids at all. Like, I'm looking at the current standard and I'm like, they're going to be just fine. It's a leadership issue. It's from the top down, and it's not bending. And I've seen it in phenomenal companies out there that have got it right. And it's about setting that standard, leading the way. Leaders lead, and they lead from the front.
Tell us a little bit about what you've learned from being an endurance athlete that's now serving you as a leader in your business.
It always goes down to focusing on the moment and figuring out how to take the next step. The next step's not going to kill you. And the sense of regret by quitting and bowing down to the emotion in the current moment is never worth it. And it's about the emotion when you hit the goal or cross the finish line. I can do a podcast when I don't feel like it. I can take the next step when I don't feel like it. I can do all these things. And so it's about learning how to remove the emotion, understand that everything, good, bad, ugly, this too shall pass. And if we bow down to that moment in the moment and we get so short-sighted, then we will have so many regrets and so many failures. And failures only remain a failure on your resume if you don't learn from it and become better. So failure is okay. In fact, failure is the path to success. But so in endurance racing, I've just learned that like this too shall pass. And the moment that I was really struggling with and not wanting to fight through, I fought through, I made it to the finish line, and now that moment to the finish line replaces any bad thing. And then looking back, like the reason I did the 100 is because I forgot about all the terrible moments in the 50 and only remembered the good ones. And I think we're just wired that way as humans. Like, we forget a lot of those bad moments and we latch on to the really good ones. And it's interesting now, I'm talking to a lot of like, my parents are now in their upper 70s, and I'm talking to a lot of kind of that generation and seeking advice and counsel as they approach their last days. And it's interesting, they shift from um, goals, desires, aspirations, bucket lists to memories and looking back and reminiscing. And I listen to their stories, and they're telling me, they don't tell me about all their negative experiences. They're remembering and sitting in all the positivity and the finish lines and all the things that they got to experience that were on the positive side. And so that's been very common and consistent across the board. So if that's true, we have the short-term memory, which is a gift in life, is to have that short-term memory about all the good and the bad, and to have it like really be weighted towards those good moments. And if you can figure out how to do that, man, your path to success and the enjoyment of it will be very different.
So powerful. You have a book coming out, Iron Hope. Tell us about it.
It's this guy right here.
It's beautiful.
So excited. We just hit Barnes and Nobles. We are in Target. It is still as of this recording, still in pre-launch, but it starts shipping January 21st. We're so excited. It was 3 years in the making. And our first book, Redefine Impossible, was about kind of an autobiography and the 50. And this one has stories from the 100, but it's really more prescriptive and like a how-to. And as I've traveled around the world, I've just noticed that people have lost hope. And one of my favorite books is actually Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, about a gentleman who was in a Nazi concentration camp, and he could tell the moment that somebody lost hope because they died. And hope is something that we framework in our minds and stories that we tell ourselves. And to me, hope is a skill set that we can develop, but it is so powerful. And this is some storytelling, but some very powerful prescriptive things that we can take into our lives in order to have that hope and be successful. And a lot of the things that we talked about today, but just highlighted in a little bit of a different way. And we've poured our heart and soul into this. I'm very excited for it to come out. Yeah, we hope that you read it and that you share it.
I'm curious about who did you have in your mind as you were writing it? Like who's the audience that you were thinking about? Oh, if I could just get this to them, if I could just have this click in their mind. Who was the archetype?
And it's funny, and I know Mandy and the Gathering comes from the perspective of branding, and the shotgun approach of marketing is the devil's work, and a very ineffective way to market. This book's for everybody, and I had everybody in mind because at the end of the day, we're all humans, and we all have a heart, and we all have a mind, and we're all struggling to show up in our own lives in a capacity to function and then hopefully get to the point where we can excel and make a difference. And so this book is truly for anybody that is struggling, that wants to dig themselves out of that moment and to move through it and past it to better days. I've spoken in over 50 countries around the world, and man, we think we're so different than everybody else in our own. We're so connected, and we are the human race. And so, without offending anybody in marketing, this is a shotgun book, and it is not targeted towards anybody, but it's for everybody because we're all in this together. And I think through disasters and catastrophe, the thing that rises up is hope and togetherness and unity. And if there's anything we need now in the United States and around the world in a place of complete divisiveness, it's hope and it's unity and it's togetherness. And I think I share some very powerful stories from individuals along the way that changed their lives because of our team's willingness to suffer intentionally. It's given them hope on the journey that they're on and the things that they're dealing with, whether it's addiction, abuse, or terminal cancer, or whatever it is. Hope is life.
Well, I encourage everyone to pick up a copy of the book. I have one more question for you today, and that is, if someone is standing at the edge of a doorway, they want to take a leap, they want to take a step towards their big goal, their dream, but they're afraid. What is the message that you have to them to take that first step?
Fear is just an emotion, and turn it into excitement. And if you can latch on to the notion that you're never going to be ready, and you just start, have a game plan, and eventually just start. I wasn't ready to do my first Ironman, but I got in the water, but I trained for it. I wasn't ready to do 30 Ironmans, and I knew I was going to learn, adapt, evolve along the way. We just started. We were not ready to do 50 Ironmans in 50 days in 50 states, but we just started and we learned along the way, and we faced a lot of adversity and difficulties and challenges, but I'm grateful for those because it allowed us to become those master problem solvers and develop that grit and toughness to make it through those, which allowed us to do more things and open more doors. And so if you're standing in the doorway, you will remain in the doorway and not experience doors that will open and that you get to walk through if you never start. And so have a dream. We've forgotten how to dream as a society. Have a dream, create a outline, a game plan, and then just start. And you will figure it out. You will meet people, you will have experiences, and you will eventually pass through so many doorways that you'll look back and go, I'm so grateful I took that first step through that door.
So good. Ready isn't a feeling, it's a choice. So good.
Love it.
Such a great conversation. Thank you so much for your time today, James. Everyone, go get that book, buy it for all your friends, make it your breakthrough year. So good. Thank you, James.
Thank you, guys. Peace.